everyone, and welcome to this edition of Ask a CFO with San Francisco-based James Vanreusel, who is the owner and founder of Vanreusel Ventures. Before we start, a little about Vanreusel Ventures. Vanreusel Ventures works with US-based for-profit and non-profit organizations with a focus on the impact in technology, healthcare, and space. Vanreusel Ventures focus on creating a strong financial platform at the CFO level and having the correct accounting financials, forecast, liquidity management, annual budgets, audit support, treasury management, capital raising support, and team hiring. Vanreusel Ventures helps you build an internal finance and accounting team that can take over when it's time to transition everything back to you and the business. Okay, James, there's another question for you then. What are common non-profit board problems and how do we remedy them?
Okay. The first one that just jumped to mind is when you're starting to grow, and you're still a young company. You want to start off with board members, and so you need to find the right ones. And I think you probably want to keep your board small so you can make decisions quickly. And so you definitely want to have people who understand the programs. You want to have, ideally, you'd like to have a lawyer on there. You'd also like to have an expert finance person on there. And then the next question is, do you want to add somebody who's very good at fundraising, who has deep relationships? Maybe you want to add somebody who's very good at partnerships, or somebody who is very well connected, or all the above. So you're really growing it slowly at a time, as time goes by. One of the issues you can come up with is when you're trying to raise money, certain funders will have expectations as to how big your board is. This is, maybe you want to raise 7 figures or above. That needs to be in place. If you're trying to raise smaller amounts of money, they will want to know who is on the board and the quality of those board members and what they bring to the table. I think what I've heard is one of the toughest good people to find are actually finance people and treasurers, which is a little bit surprising to me, but that's what I've heard, that there is a shortage of. Some of the issues you can get. I guess firstly, if the quality is not high enough, you're going to have some problems raising funding. I think another issue is if the board members don't fully understand, they might understand for-profit boards, but they don't understand non-profit boards. And non-profit boards is all around, and I've mentioned this in previous answers to questions, but it's all about impact. It's all about how spending is divided between the programmatic work and other works. Because a lot of nonprofits are international, it makes internal controls that much harder. And so the ability to fully understand as a board member any kind of risk to the internal controls, any kind of fraud problems, is very hard to do if you don't have experience with that. So you might be an expert finance person, but if you don't understand challenges to international internal controls and how those can translate into areas of fraud, that can be a problem. And so I think working with an experienced finance person in management, I think the finance committee and the audit committee can really gain a lot of understanding if the experience isn't fully there on the board yet. And that's typically in the earlier stages. And another issue you can see on the board is if the board gets too big. Some nonprofits have very big boards, and on the for-profit side, if you look at VC-backed companies, maybe there's 4 people on the board or 6 people, with some, they're not board members, but they're individuals. They're large investors who want to sit in on board meetings. So sometimes it goes up to 10, but they don't have a vote. But with nonprofit boards, you can have 10, 15 people who can vote. And so you need to get all of them on the same page. And so sometimes that means, for instance, if you're trying to approve a budget, you have to work through the finance committee first. And then when they've been convinced, then you have to start talking to other people on the board who might have issues to sell the budget to them as well. And so that whole budget process, even if you feel like the budget is done and it's gone through the finance committee, you've still got to convince all these different board members, and it might not even pass the first board meeting test. And so you might have to go make tweaks and go back again to convince them that, yes, we have crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And so that can raise problems or can raise friction as well.
James, you mentioned there about the size of the board. One question I straight away thought, well, we wonder what the perfect size for a board is. But then got me thinking about, I can't remember where I read it. Is it about Amazon who said if you can't share 2 pizzas or something, 2 large pizzas, and then in a meeting, then the theme is too big? Was it now what?
It was Amazon, yeah.
It was Amazon, wasn't it? I thought it was. They said if you can't share 2 large pizzas, is it maybe 1 large pizza? I don't know. Then the team is too big. I think it's 6 to 9, isn't it, or something like that? It can't be feeding me, James. That's all I know. I need 1 large one on my own. So there we go. But is it a perfect size for the board, James?
I don't know if there's a perfect size. I mean, nonprofits typically have larger boards than for-profits, and I think a lot of that has to do with fundraising. You can have nonprofit boards that are purely strategic, and then you can have nonprofit boards where there are a lot of people there because they help with the fundraising. So they'll do their own fundraisers. They have a lot of connections. They try to bring donors in, and so that balloons out sometimes the size of the board. But I think the larger the board, it does create issues, and a lot of times you'll have, the governance structure of a nonprofit is a lot more complex for younger companies than it is for for-profit companies. And you can easily see nonprofits have the main board, but then they'll have, even at a size of, let's say, 5 million in revenue, they'll have a finance committee and an audit committee and a governance committee and a programmatic committee and 2 or 3 other committees. And it just becomes very complicated.
So that leads on to one last question that I have. What if there's one board member that's causing problems? How do you remedy that?
Yeah. It really depends what the problem is. I think if they're causing problems, then either the chairman and or the CEO needs to sit down with that board member. And if it's around a big decision that's been made, I think it's just listening to that board member and just saying, do you feel like you've been heard? Because maybe a decision has been made that this person did not agree with, but they don't feel heard. And so it keeps coming back up that I didn't agree with it. And so they feel boxed in that, it's going to go ahead. So either I'm going to be heard and I'm going to put my foot down and create trouble, or I just need to quit. And so the answer is, well, is there a third option here where that board member can feel heard and can either say, okay, that's fine. I agree to disagree, but we can move forward and see what happens. I still believe in the mission and everything. Or, and this happens sometimes, the board members resign from the board for different reasons. But it doesn't have to be in a bad way or with bad blood.
Yeah, that was quite a long answer about boards and board problems and members issues. But I know it's such a complex issue, so we have to cover quite a lot there. But James, I'm sure there'll be people with more questions. Can you let them know how they can get in touch?
Yeah, if you have more questions, James at vanreuselventures.com. You can connect through the website. Typically we're quite active on social media. If you post a comment there to one of the posts that we have, me or my team will see it, and I will respond.